In this video, we will look at sending and receiving our first packets. First, let's look at sending a packet. We'll need to go to the socket header. We are going to make a function that returns a p result called send, and it will take in a pointer to the data. It will take in an integer for the number of bytes that we're sending. And then lastly, it will take in a reference to an integer to say the number of bytes that were sent. Let's generate this definition. In order to send data, we will call a function called send. Send returns an integer, and that integer will store the number of bytes that were successfully sent. We might attempt to send 100 bytes and only send 40 bytes, for example. These are just arbitrary numbers, but the concept remains that just because you attempt to send a certain number of bytes does not mean that that actually all gets sent in one attempt. First argument of send is the socket handle. The next argument is a const char pointer to the data. So all we will do here is we will just cast const char, and we'll pass in our data. The next argument is the length of the data. So we'll pass in number of bytes here. And the last argument is the flags, which we will not be using. If we take a look at the return value for send, if no error occurs, we will get back the total number of bytes sent. Otherwise, we will get a value of socket error, and we can get the specific error code with WSA get last error. So what we will do is we will check if bytes sent is equal to socket error. We will store the error and return an error code for p result. Otherwise, we will return success. Now let's go up to our client and implement sending data. What we will do is after we successfully connect, we will set up a loop here. And we are just going to send strings of size 256. So we'll create a buffer. We are going to use this string copy function in order to copy data to the buffer. And the message that the client sends will just say hello world from client. Next, we need to create an integer to store the bytes sent. We will not be directly using this here, but it is an argument for the function, and we will use this in the next tutorial. Next, let's set up our while loop. So we're going to set up a variable to store our result, initialize it to success. What we will do here is we are going to store the return value from send into our result. So if it's not success, we'll break out of this loop. And we're going to attempt to send our buffer up here. And we are specifying it as 256 bytes. And then we are storing the number of bytes that were actually sent in bytes sent, but we aren't doing anything with that yet. And then we are just sleeping 500 milliseconds, which is half a second. So we're attempting to send a packet every half second. Now we need to set up the server to receive this packet. Let's go back to the socket header. And receive works a lot like send. What we will do is we will have it return a p result. The first argument will be the destination for the data. The next argument will be the number of bytes. And the last argument will be the number of bytes received. Let's generate this definition. So what we will do is we will say bytes received is equal to, and we will call recv to receive data. We will pass in the socket handle, the char pointer to the destination, the length of bytes that we're receiving. The flags will be null. As far as the return value goes for receive, it's just a little bit different here. If no error occurs, it'll work like send, where it gets the number of bytes received. However, if the connection is gracefully closed, we will get back 0. Otherwise, we will get back a value of socket error, and we will get the code like WSA get last error. So we know that if bytes received so if we get back 0, we just return an error code because the connection was closed. If we get socket error, we can store the error that occurred in our integer, and then we can return not yet implemented. Otherwise, it was success. Now let's set up the server to receive the packets from the client. So we'll go to the server. What we will do is, after we accept the connection, we will create a while loop. But first we need to create our buffer to store the data in. Create an integer to store the number of bytes received. And we'll create a similar loop to what the client had. So what we are doing here is we are saying while results success, we're going to attempt to receive data and store whether it was successful or not in a result. And if it was not successful, we'll break out. Otherwise, we will print out whatever the data was that we received. Now keep in mind, we are not handling partial packets. So it is possible that you try to receive 256 and don't get it, and then the rest of your data stream is corrupt. But we will review how to fix that in the next video. Let's just go ahead and test this out and see what it looks like. First, I'm going to rebuild everything. Now I'm going to run the server and now the client. Alright, and we see it is attempting to send chunk of data, and then the server is getting hello world from client over and over. What's interesting is, let's say that the client disconnects, the server will end because receive will return an error. And the same idea, if the server disconnects, the client will end because send will result in an error. So that concludes this video, and in the next video we will cover partial packets.